And Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
And welcome to On the Money, where we're focused on Britain's cost of living crisis, helping you to beat the squeeze. I'm Liam Halligan. For the next hour, we'll be talking about a new government advertising campaign asking companies to keep prices low, helping to tackle this cost of living crisis. Many small firms, though, struggling with soaring costs of their own and spiralling taxes, are furious, calling it a slap in the face. Who's to blame for inflation? We hold a detailed discussion. Plus, an update on the airport chaos. And our Money Talks interview today is with a man trying to make call centres more human. On the Money, after the GB News headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
Thank you, Liam. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past one. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson says NATO must explode the myth that the alliance is an aggressor on the world stage. That as the UK commits an extra £1 billion towards boosting Ukraine's capabilities, including its air defence systems. Speaking on the last day of the summit in Madrid, the Prime Minister also said Russia's decision to abandon the strategic Black Sea outpost of Snake Island was evidence of Ukraine's ability to fight back. Boris Johnson insisted we must ensure President Putin fails in the conflict and make it clear to the world that Russia is the only aggressor.
We need to explode the myth that it was in any way NATO that had responsibility for provoking the conflict. Nothing could be further from the truth. And if you want proof that NATO is a purely defensive alliance, you could have no more eloquent testimony than the accession of Finland and Sweden, quintessentially peace-loving countries.
Well, the Secretary-General of NATO said Sweden and Finland will sign the accession protocol to formally join the alliance on Tuesday. Also speaking at the summit earlier, Jens Stoltenberg said, when it came to Russian aggression, NATO's preparing for any eventuality.
We face the most serious security situation in decades, but we are rising to the challenge with unity and resolve. The decisions you have taken in Madrid will ensure that our alliance continue to preserve peace, prevent conflict, and protect our people and our values. Europe and North America standing together in NATO.
Well, in the UK, Labour says government cuts to 10,000 British troops over the next 3 years is putting our NATO obligations at risk. Tory former Defence Minister Tobias Ellwood says he believes MPs would vote to reverse government plans to cut troops and that the nation would support them.
Clearly not the time to be cutting our army by 10,000 troops, because this sends a clear message to Putin that we're not in it for the long haul. We can't sustain 2 battle groups in Estonia and place pressure on the army to conduct all its other duties to keep the nation safe. Mr. Speaker, can we have a debate and indeed a vote on reversing these cuts? If there was a free vote, I know how the House would act, and they would have the nation's support.
Passengers say Heathrow is total chaos after the airport ordered the cancellation of 30 flights. Thousands of travellers were disrupted by a rare schedule intervention, with many not realising their journey had been scrapped until they arrived. Heathrow bosses say they're working with airlines to get those affected rebooked on alternative flights. More than half of Scottish people don't want an independence referendum, another independence referendum, that's according to a new poll. Research by the Scotsman newspaper says 53% think there shouldn't be an Indie Ref 2, 40% say there should be, with the remainder undecided. It's after First Minister Nicola Sturgeon announced plans to push for a second vote in October next year. Meanwhile, a former Scottish MP has been jailed for 2 years for embezzling nearly £25,000. Ex-SNP member Natalie McGarry stole the money from 2 pro-independence groups. The former representative for Glasgow East was convicted last month on 2 charges of embezzlement. The judge said the 40-year-old had betrayed those who'd put their trust in her. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, let's return to Liam with On the Money.
And coming up on the money today, inflation, as measured by the Consumer Price Index, is 9.1%, a 40-year high, as the cost of living crisis continues. But inflation faced by firms, the cost of materials, labour and other inputs, the Producer Price Index, is more than double that. The government's, though, now urging firms not to pass on price rises, which many small businesses are calling a slap in the face. Who's to blame for inflation? We hold a detailed discussion. Plus, today the first hydrogen and electric-powered lorry to be mass-produced in the UK has been unveiled. We'll be hearing from the boss behind the start-up firm Tiva on how this could be the solution for heavy goods vehicles facing escalating diesel costs. And each day On the Money features an in-depth Money Talks interview. Well, today we meet Martin Anderson. He's the CEO of the Lemon Contact Centre. He'll be talking about founding his business 2 decades ago from his garage and why he's on a mission to revolutionise the customer services industry. That's later in the show. And as ever, I want your questions, opinions, ideas. What do you think of the issues raised in today's On the Money? How do they impact you, not least those spiralling diesel costs? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'll read out some of your messages later in the show, so stay with us. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're On the Money. Stand by, oh yay, roll up, for some good news. And here it is. Japanese car giant Nissan is recruiting for 300 new roles, including in manufacturing, engineering and maintenance at its Sunderland factory, accelerating plans for electric vehicle production. Nissan Sunderland's preparing 2 new eco-friendly versions of its popular models, the Duke and the Qashqai. Good for the North East and good for Britain. The bigger picture, though, is that British business confidence in June slumped to a 15-month low. That's according to the long-established Lloyds Bank Business Barometer, which fell 10 points to 28%, the lowest level since March 2021, the depths of lockdown. And the majority of firms, of course, are reporting they're having to raise prices because of inflation. During the year to May, the Consumer Price Index rose 9.1%. That's more than 4 times the Bank of England's 2% target, a fresh 40-year high. The Retail Price Index, an alternative inflation measure, was up 11.7% over the last year. But even more worrying, the Producer Price Index, that was 22.1% higher, pointing to serious cost pressures in the pipeline. The costs faced by firms for the inputs they need to provide the goods and services they then sell us, that is the Producer Price Index, is now at a 45-year high. And that's why so many small firms in particular are struggling to survive. And they're upset about a new government advertising campaign to be unveiled shortly, we're told, which asks firms to cut prices for consumers to help with the cost of living crisis. Asking small firms to soak up additional costs just isn't realistic, says the Federation of Small Businesses, especially when so many are worried about basic survival and have already cut all expenses, even necessary ones, to the bone. It's a slap in the face for government to spend the extra tax it's raising from businesses on state-run marketing campaigns, says the Federation of Small Businesses. Most small firms, they say, are well beyond the point of being able to absorb extra costs without passing them on, which is often a last resort. Strong words. Now, the UK's small and medium-sized enterprises, from pubs and restaurants to manufacturers and building firms, they account for half the UK economy, employing 2/3 of us. Having been hammered by lockdown and now spiralling inflation, many are on their last legs. Now, to me, a government-funded campaign asking those small and medium-sized enterprises to absorb even more cost pressures at a time when business taxation is spiralling seems woefully out of touch. Is that fair, or am I being too harsh? And that's our On the Money question today. Should the government be blaming small firms for rising prices? Grown-up conversations with people who really know their stuff. That's what we do here on The Money. And on cue, it's Michael Whedon, Chair of Retail and High Street Policy Unit at the Federation of Small Businesses. Good to have you with us, Michael. It's a delight to welcome back on The Money Mark Bridgen, owner of the Dog Restaurant in Wingham, down there in Kent. And also Dan Bryan, owner of street food vendor Falafia in Hull. We also have in the studio Nathan Mills, a London-based butcher, and MissMoneyMagpie.com, Jasmine Birtles, a.k.a. Jazzy B. There she is. Great to have you all with us. Mike Whedon, let's go to you first. The FSB, the Federation of Small Businesses, you've been around a long time, a very influential lobby group. You know how to talk in public. You know how to lobby ministers. These are really strong words in response to this advertising campaign about to be launched, basically urging businesses not to pass on their rising costs.
There's some of the strong words. Thank you, Liam. It's jaw-dropping. The idea that you spend government money on a marketing campaign to put a sign in a shop window about this and to ask businesses to cut their prices to consumers, when, as you've already explained very, very neatly, thank you, what's driving these prices underneath is jaw-dropping. Especially given that the money that it's going to be spent out of is rising taxes coming from things like, for example, petrol, with the price rising. After you've got the actual price of petrol and then you've got fuel duty, VAT goes on the top of that. The amount spent, according to the ONS, last month in May on car fuel was a third up on what it was the previous year, which was itself double what was the year before that. So there is a huge influx of money coming to the government from rising prices themselves because it taxes proportionally on top of that. Now, rather than spend that on a marketing campaign, we think it should really be put into supporting businesses themselves.
Now hear from some small business leaders. Mark, you do own the Dog Restaurant and Gastropub down there in Wingham in Kent. You were on The Money recently. We were discussing your escalating cost base, your massively spiralling energy bill, up to 100 grand. It was previously about 35 grand. That's eating into your margins, threatening your business. Now the government's saying it's your fault. You shouldn't be passing on those cost rises.
You took the words out of my mouth. They are out of touch. They're either not listening or they don't understand. You know, come and see our books. Come and see the reality. There is no margin. You know, yes, nobody wants to be in a price-driven marketing campaign, and then anything we do, you know, we're a quality product. You know, we do not want to be cheap. But yeah, we do promotions, we do what we can. And in these times, we're coming up with lots of ideas to try and, you know, tempt the customer in with a bit of better, you know, even more value and a bit of a deal. But there isn't a margin there to slash prices. It is laughable. And I was staggered when I read it.
The Garden of England in Kent, up to Humberside, to Dan Bryan, who runs street food company Falafia in Hull. Dan, great to have you with us on the show. I think you're a first-time contributor. You are welcome. What did you think when you heard that the government's going to fund a campaign with taxation, including business taxation, telling the country, effectively, that if firms are passing on their cost pressures in prices, then that's the reason for inflation?
Well, that's trying to dupe the population into believing it's not the government's fault. The reason for inflation has been government policy these last, 12 years since the 2008 recession, coming from the Fed in America, where they've just been printing money hand over fist. This is what happens. This is how effectively socialism on a massive scale ends. It's massive amount of inflation and then it spirals. And what the government are asking us to do is essentially price controls, which they tried that in America in the 70s. I think it was under Nixon. They tried rent controls. And what happens is you just get bubbles elsewhere in the economy. And like the gentleman's just said, we have to pass on those costs, even though it's the last resort for us to do so, because there is no margin. Our profit margin goes to pay wages. If we don't pay wages, then you end up with redundancies and no staff, and in the end, no businesses.
Do you see this as a kind of blame-shifting exercise by ministers?
Absolutely. They're always looking to shift the blame onto somebody else. This is a macroeconomic problem. This is going on globally, and it's because of the way the capitalist system has been corrupted over the last... I mean, we could go back further from 1971 when America was taken off the gold standard. They started printing money then. And this is now, we're now seeing the results of this because financial crises happen very slowly. But that's a whole other debate. You're asking about businesses being asked to take on this burden, and there simply isn't the money there in our bank accounts to do this. It is ludicrous.
Well, we've heard from two small business leaders there. Let's hear from another. Nathan Mills in the studio. You're a London-based independent butcher. You're involved with this organisation, the Independent Butchers Association. What would you say to your fellow business owners, your fellow entrepreneurs, your fellow employers, your fellow corporation taxpayers that you've just heard from?
It's tough. It's getting tougher, and I don't know where it's going to end. It's hard to make a discount now. It is really, really hard. Every time that I turn around now, it is somebody else is increasing their prices to us. For the government to say for us to suck it up, it's not a great thing. It's
business rates, isn't it, on your premises? It's the cost of the meat that you're buying because of the cost of feed that the farmers are having to feed to those animals that you then sell on to customers.
It is definitely a trickle on. Every time I pick up a phone to a farmer, it is now my feed prices have gone up. I kind of seen that happening about 5 or 6 months ago. You kind of look at it and you hear about the fertiliser and everything like that, and the prices of fertiliser going up. And you're thinking farmers aren't really going to put down a crop this year. It's too expensive.
That's right.
It tripled in price.
Or they'll use less fertiliser so yields go down.
Yes, yeah.
So we're storing up another food crisis.
We are. And there's many people talking about not even putting turkeys down this year.
How do you feel? We got a corporation tax coming down the chute, as you know. Currently, corporation is 19%. And for radio listeners to this discussion, Nathan Mills, an extremely distinguished businessman, he's literally laughing because he's not crying. He's literally shaking his head. Corporation tax is going from 19 to 25% next year. You've just absorbed an increase in national insurance contributions. How does that feel as a business leader?
It's not only that. You look at the furlough that we paid, that's seen as another income to our business, which was taxed on as well. You know, we paid out that money to our staff, we received it, and that's other income from the government. We were taxed on that. I don't think you can increase business taxes. Everything else has increased along the road.
Jasmine, you and I know from economic history, and we know just from looking at the economy, there are businesses that are using this inflationary environment as an excuse to put up prices, right? A lot of people would say that some of the fuel retailers are doing that, though they're not here to comment and would deny that, I should say. But we've heard from three honest-to-goodness small business owners who are working day and night to make ends meet, to employ local people, and they are saying that this government information campaign that we're about to be exposed to is cynical and it's out of touch.
Yeah, it's also a waste of the taxpayers' money, frankly, because, you know, it's basic business, you know, as we've touched on already, that when times are hard, one of the ways that you can get people in is to bring your prices down. And you know, as we've heard already from a restaurateur, they're trying to give as much value as possible. And I've certainly seen it with supermarkets. I was talking to Asda yesterday, who are pushing their Just Essentials range, and they are actively promoting it because they know that more and more people are needing the cheaper versions. So it's happening anyway. Nobody needs to be told, really, if you bring your prices down, you'll get more customers. Hello, on the whole, that's the way it works with business.
Briefly back to Mike Whedon before the break. Mike, you are from the Federation of Small Businesses. You have called this a slap in the face, this upcoming government information campaign, advertising campaign, urging businesses not to pass on costs to consumers. Have you seen these adverts yet? And how do you think this is going to go down with the general public? It's certainly not going down well here on The Money.
I haven't seen them yet. I can't imagine it's going to go down well with anyone, because remember that most, you know, consumers know small businesses or work for small businesses or run small businesses. By the way, I'm also I own and run a small business as well. So this is not news to them, what's actually going on. They know about these cost pressures. And we know that businesses, you know, being asked to soak up more costs is unrealistic because they've been soaking up costs consistently for a year or so. We know, for example, that 1 in 8 of our members is telling us that they're at risk of insolvency now. Their debt burden is huge. Their cash reserves are very low. It's dangerous.
Mike, that's really, really interesting. I mean, the government's going to go ahead with this. It strikes me it's going to go down like the proverbial lead balloon. It strikes me this is some kind of policy dreamt up by somebody in Whitehall who has zero experience of business, zero experience of real commerce.
Yeah, I mean, I think the government always thinks businesses are loaded. They're not loaded. They're very strained. And we say, if they really want to help, don't do the marketing campaign, cut fuel duty, cut VAT on fuel and VAT on electricity. Really help. They can do it. They've got the income coming in. Relieve more businesses of the rising burdens of business rates. They've gone up again this year, although they're still for many discounted, but not for all. And do things that really make a difference to the real cost base in a way that the government can control. They will say they can't control prices, but they can control taxes.
They certainly can. All of you, a fantastic discussion. Really, really penetrating contributions from the front line of British business. We've got to leave it there, I'm afraid, because we're going to talk to a government minister just after the break. But thanks to all my guests, Mike Whedon, Chair of Retail and High Street Policy at the Federation for Small Businesses, Mark Bridgen, owner of the Dog Restaurant in Wingham in Kent, Dan Bryan, who runs street food vendor Falafia in Hull. Fantastic contribution, Dan. Please come back on the show. Nathan Mills, the London-based butcher in the studio with us. We'll be inviting you back to Nathan, and MissMoneyMagpie.com. Jasmine Birtles is staying with us. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. After the break, we'll be speaking about the Post Office Horizon scandal, as a number of postmasters and postmistresses are set to receive, between them, £19.5 million in interim compensation, and the emails are flooding in thick and fast. We'll read about some of those shortly. Stay with us. You're On the Money.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
And welcome back. You're on the money. It's 1:25. Now, the Post Office Horizon scandals, often described as the most widespread miscarriage of justice in UK history. It saw upwards of 700 former employees wrongly accused of stealing from their post office tills between 1999 and 2015. Dozens of postmasters and postmistresses found themselves in bankruptcy or sent to jail. Some even took their own lives. But these were false claims due to a flaw in a computer system called Horizon, manufactured by Fujitsu. While many of the victims have received compensation, the original 555 to take legal action were left out until today. Today they've been told they'll receive £19.5 million interim compensation between them from the government. Here to speak about this, it's the Minister for Small Business and Minister for Postal Affairs, Paul Scully. Minister, we're very grateful to you for appearing on The Money. Now, I know that you've personally done a lot of work trying to get this compensation package out the door, but crikey, it's taken a long time.
Yeah, look, it's a really complicated piece of work that's undoing 20 years of just a horrendous situation for so many hundreds of people who have been wronged by people in authority over that period of time. So we've got three levels of systems of compensation tackling different people. And today was all about the last people, ironically, the people who first blew open the entire case, allowing others to come in behind them.
A few of whom, sadly, tragically, have passed away. Minister, is there going to be any investigation into the conduct of senior post office executives, not least Paula Venables, the CEO, during part of this period? She denies wrongdoing for their conduct. Are we going to check out if there's evidence that they knew that there were problems with Horizon, that they were concerned about tackling a huge, powerful contractor like Fujitsu? Because I think for a lot of people looking on, and this story goes beyond business. This is a huge societal story about how we are governed. Are we going to be examining what senior executives did as ordinary people went through hell, languished in prison, gave birth in prison on a false pretense?
Absolutely, we're going to do that, Liam. You had the court case that I was talking about. Justice Fraser, the judge in that case, had a really damning judgment of many of the people involved. And one of the things that I did quite early doors was when I became minister, was to set up an inquiry to look at this, to really go through this in fine detail. And so Wyn Williams, a retired judge, a former judge, he's doing this on a statutory footing, and it's starting next week. He's taking testimony from the postmasters. Starting next week, he's going to start taking evidence from people in government, people in post office, Fujitsu that supplied the software, and find out exactly who knew what when and hold people to account.
Well, it's not my job to hand out billet doux to government ministers, but I will say congratulations to you publicly. I know you've been working hard on this. I've been keeping a close eye on the case. And here on The Money, we'll be keeping a close eye on what happens now, and not least with regard to those senior executives. I did want to ask you about something else, Minister. We've been hosting a discussion here today about this upcoming government campaign urging businesses not to pass on cost pressures. You all know, because I know you take a close interest in the numbers, that while the CPI inflation figure, the headline inflation figure is 9.1%, the PPI, the producer price index measure of inflation, the cost of inputs, stuff that firms need to generate the goods and services that they then sell on to us, that PPI inflation is 22.1% and heading upward, a 45-year high. We have thousands, tens of thousands of small firms on their knees. And quite frankly, we've just heard from three of them, they are pretty miffed, to say the least, that taxpayers' money is being spent on a public information campaign that they feel is trying to shift the blame for rising prices onto them.
No, that's not what it's about, Liam. I'm the Minister for Hospitality, the Minister for Retail and the Minister for Small Business. So I cover so many of those businesses that you're talking about that are getting that pressure, and I hear from them on a day-to-day basis. But Dave Buttress is that czar. He's that cost of living czar. He founded Just Eat. He knows his hospitality sector really, really well, and he knows retail. And I was on a call with him yesterday with some of the retail leaders, sector leaders. And what he's doing is trying to get to retailers to collaborate, and hospitality business and others to collaborate just the same way that they did during COVID, to make sure that they're greater than the sum of their parts, to look at things over the next 6 months about over the summer, enjoying the summer, about getting back to school, about when the energy bills really kick in October, the pressures there, and indeed Christmas, to see what more they can do, not to not put up prices or these kind of things, but is there something we can do cross sectors and just and then really make sure that people are absolutely aware of what's out there for them.
I do appreciate you answering questions on this, Minister. You came on to talk about Horizon. And so thanks for that. I would say, though, that, you know, I interview business leaders, particularly small and medium-sized business leaders on this show every day, Monday to Friday. And the message is constant and consistent. It's why are you putting up corporation tax next year from 19 to 25%? It's when is there going to be a proper review of business rates? It's why aren't we going back to emergency VAT levels for the hospitality industry, which is on its knees. You're a business guy. You're one of the few people in government, in my view, who does actually have some proper business experience. These business leaders, these small business owners who generate huge amounts of employment and drive the country forward, they've got a point, haven't they?
Yeah, look, everything you said, that shopping list there, I hear on a day-to-day basis. I think in my first year as Minister, I spoke to something like 5,000 to 6,000 businesses. So I'm speaking to them all the time, and I'm very, very aware of that. What I think you find at the moment, you talked about those pressures, the inflationary pressures going up. I think we're at the sort of foothills of this cost of living situation. If you remember back to the beginning of COVID, when the Chancellor was praised for that first emergency budget, it was something like £12 billion worth of support. He ended up pushing £408 billion out the door. So we've got to understand, is this a short-term problem that we're trying to crack? Is it a medium term? Because then we're going to have to answer it in a different way. And so what you'll find is that the Chancellor will look, he will respond, he will flex accordingly to what he's seeing in that data. But I always put that to him, exactly that shopping list, Liam, because it's exactly what I'm hearing from businesses as well.
We need to get you on the show, Minister, in order to have a longer chat. I know a lot of our listeners and viewers would appreciate that. I'll be in touch. For now, thank you to Paul Scully, Minister for Postal Affairs and for Small Business, talking about that new compensation package for those Horizon Post Office scandal victims. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. It's 1:32, and after the break, we'll be crossing over to Warwickshire, where the first hydrogen-powered HGV lorry's being launched. Who'd have thunk it? That's after the GB News headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
Thank you, Liam. It's 1:33. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. We start with some breaking news. A mother and stepfather have been jailed for life for the murder of 5-year-old Logan Mwangi. 31-year-old Ankarad Williamson will serve a minimum term of 28 years for the murder of her son. 40-year-old John Cole will serve a minimum of 29 years. A 14-year-old boy who can't be named for legal reasons has also been sentenced to life. He'll serve a minimum of 15 years. The Prime Minister said Russia's decision to abandon the strategic Black Sea outpost of Snake Island is evidence of Ukraine's ability to fight back. It says the UK commits an extra £1 billion towards boosting Ukraine's capabilities, including its air defence systems. Speaking on the last day of the NATO summit in Madrid, Boris Johnson said the alliance must explode the myth it's an aggressor on the world stage.
We need to explode the myth that it was in any way NATO that had responsibility for provoking the conflict. Nothing could be further from the truth. And if you want proof that NATO is a purely defensive alliance, you could have no more eloquent testimony than the accession of Finland and Sweden, quintessentially peace-loving countries.
The Secretary-General of NATO said Sweden and Finland will sign the accession protocol to formally join the alliance on Tuesday. Also speaking at the summit earlier, Jens Stoltenberg said when it comes to Russian aggression, NATO's preparing for any eventuality.
We face the most serious security situation in decades, but we are rising to the challenge with unity and resolve. The decisions you have taken in Madrid will ensure that our alliance continue to preserve peace, prevent conflict, and protect our people and our values. Europe and North America standing together in NATO.
TV online and DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.211 US and 1.165 euros. The price of gold currently stands at £1,491.54 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for real-time investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
And welcome back, you're on the money. Now, have you ever shown up to an airport, bleary-eyed, laden with heavy bags, only to find your flight's been cancelled? Well, for hundreds of unlucky flyers at Heathrow Airport today, that's the reality that they're facing. With more than 30 flights already not taking off this morning and afternoon, the airport's blaming severe staff shortages, which means they can't load passengers safely, they say. Now, thousands of aviation jobs were cut, of course, during the pandemic. And since then, many airlines, security control and businesses have struggled to recruit and train and get security cleared enough new staff to deal with renewed demand. And with the summer season in full swing and many desperate to get away after disrupted lockdown summers, these chaotic airport scenes are increasingly common. Well, our reporter Rosie Wright is at Heathrow now, and she can join us. Rosie, people work all year. They've been trying to get away for a long time. You turn up at the airport, everything's packed, and you can't get on the flight. What a feeling.
Oh, Liam, it must have been really frustrating for those passengers who arrived this morning. 30 flights were cancelled today, and as you just mentioned, it was Heathrow Airport that made the decision. They said to airlines, we've got to cancel 30 flights because we are basically at capacity to safely be able to transport all of those passengers and to have all those flights take off. They made a very clear decision. They said it was one they had carefully considered. 98% of their schedule, I must say, did go ahead today, but for those people scheduled on those 30 flights, they got far less than 24 hours notice. Some of those passengers turned up this morning expecting to go and then realised my flight isn't taking off. Now, the most affected airline was British Airways, and they said they apologised to all the customers involved and they got in contact with them to try and see if it was possible to get them on an alternative flight. Now, you may very well be listening to this thinking, well, I'm flying from Heathrow this weekend or next week. Now, I have literally just gotten off the phone to Heathrow Airport, and a representative has told me today was an exceptional circumstance. I said, look, am I going to be stood here tomorrow having the same conversation? And they said no, there are no plans at this point for any cancellations tomorrow. The real problem has been capacity. There are just simply more passengers than the airport can safely handle. You might be asking why? Surely we knew this was going to happen. Another problem that passengers have had is not only long queues at securities but also a shortage of staff, like baggage handling staff, is actually reuniting yourself with your bag after you've got off the plane. Now, earlier on in the week, there were mass piled up in Terminal 2 of Heathrow Airport of people's bags. They haven't been reunited with them. Someone who knows that very well is Paul Hawkins, GB News reporter and presenter, who flew to Munich on Saturday night for the G7. He arrived in Munich. His bag wasn't there. Paul's now back from Munich, and he's had an email this morning from Lufthansa saying, your bag's off to Munich. And he's thinking, this is really not what I need. Well, Heathrow Airport told me, if you're in that position, like many people are, where you're not with your bag, don't contact the airport, contact the airline instead. They are the people responsibility of getting you and your luggage reunited. But it is just another one of those things that are impacting consumer confidence as we all want to get away on those summer holidays, with potential strikes looming as well. People, passengers, when they pay for their ticket, they want to be sure that when they turn up at the airport that flight's actually going to take off.
Crikey, Paul Hawkins in a bathrobe. He almost had to present GB News in his bathrobe from the hotel in Germany. That'd have been good for the viewing figures. Rosie Wright at Heathrow. Keep your chin up. All the best. Thanks a lot for joining us. Now, on Tuesday, we asked, is fracking really the answer? And just today, the UK's first ever hydrogen heavy goods vehicle, better known as an HGV, launched in an innovative attempt to tackle escalating diesel costs. Used in other forms of transportation, such as buses, for some time, hydrogen fuel cells have long been seen as a viable alternative energy source. Manufactured in Tilbury, this new technology by Tiva Electric Trucks is being unveiled today at the Road Transport Expo in Warwickshire. And joining me now to talk about all this is the boss at Tiva, Asher Bennett. Great to have you with us. We've often talked about hydrogen power here on The Money. It's a particular interest of mine, as you may know. Now we've got HGVs fuelled by hydrogen. We've got JCB diggers fuelled by hydrogen. People in the industry talk to me about potentially cargo ships being fuelled by hydrogen. Tell us about your project.
There are a lot of electric cars on the road today, large variety out there, and not a lot of electric trucks. And the reason is trucks go out for 8, 9, 10 hours of work a day, whereas cars tend to go for 1.5. The average car drives 1.5 hours a day. Lithium-ion batteries and electricity is an amazing energy source for vehicles. It's abundant and cheap, but it has those range limits. So what we do is a dual energy approach. We use lithium-ion batteries as our primary energy. We charge them at night from normal chargers. But to remove any risk of not being able to complete the day or to go farther and heavier, we back it up with the greatness of a hydrogen fuel cell system. And all that is for the point of we want to drive a lot of miles per day. That's every mile you drive on electricity is so much cheaper than driving a diesel truck. When the economics work, fleets will buy a lot of trucks.
Asher Bennett, it strikes me, having watched this sector for some time, that ministers are underplaying the potential of hydrogen. Certainly, that's what various people across the sector think. Do you think that's the case? Do you think hydrogen could be a big part of the answer to our energy future?
So hydrogen certainly has a great place in decarbonizing our economy. Certainly, we want to replace all dirty hydrogen where you, for example, for making fertilizer with green hydrogen. Along the way, we want to use the great advantages of hydrogen to electrify and change other industries. Trucks is a very important part. They're a big part of the problem of carbon. And so we're taking those advantages and using it in a very practical way to get a lot of trucks on the road. In the future, in a decade, maybe batteries alone will be the solution. It'll probably be like what we're doing today, a balance. For different applications, you'll want a different size of battery and different amounts of hydrogen.
Now, the beauty, of course, of hydrogen is that the only emission is water, but you have to create the hydrogen using usually electrolysis, and you need power for that electrolysis. A danger is, of course, that we use so-called brown hydrogen, where the electrolysis is fueled by carbon fuels, oil and gas. Surely we should be using yellow hydrogen, which is fueled by atomic energy to do the electrolysis, or even green hydrogen, where we use renewable energy to generate the electrolysis to generate the hydrogen. That is a danger, isn't it? To what extent do you think we can wean ourselves off fossil fuels as this hydrogen revolution unfolds, as I believe it will, and you clearly believe it will, to make sure that we're using green hydrogen so we're not just pushing the problem somewhere else?
I fully agree with you, and we are very focused on using green or low carbon hydrogens. As you said, there are different types out there, and to use more and more of it. Even if you're only using green hydrogen, one would consider, let's just charge the truck with that green kilowatt hour coming out of the solar or wind farm, because when you go through the hydrogen system, electrolysis, and then through the fuel cell, you are losing energy along the way, but it has great advantages. If you want to get a lot of trucks on the road, you also have to use the benefit of hydrogen, and we are very focused on using the green or other low carbon hydrogens. That's our goal, and not using more than you need, because we also use direct grid electricity.
Very practical question to end, Asher Bennett, if I may. How much are these trucks going to cost, the most basic unit, compared to their diesel equivalents, and when will they be available?
So you have to understand, electric trucks cost more than their diesel comparators. A lot of expensive components on there, but they're much cheaper to operate if you drive enough miles per day. And that's what we're focusing on. So if you look at the economics, in the lifetime cost of operating a diesel truck, typically 2/3 of the cost might go to the oil and gas industry. In our case, the purchase price is much higher, but the monthly fuel and maintenance cost is much, much lower. Much better now.
50% more than a diesel truck, 100% more, 3 times more, just roughly. And when?
Depending on the different variants we have, it's between 2 to 2.5 times the cost of a diesel truck. But you can save money from the first month you use it if you lease the truck, because then you're paying a higher lease cost, you're paying a very low energy cost, and you're on par with leasing a diesel truck if you drive enough miles per day. I'll say that again and again.
Asher Bennett, really interesting. I'd like to get you back on the show to have a more detailed discussion about your hydrogen electric hybrid HGV trucks.
I would appreciate that, and obviously you have a lot of knowledge, and that's great to have a deeper discussion.
Great to have you with us, and we will see you again soon. Asher Bennett there, from Tiva, who are launching today a hydrogen electric hybrid HGV truck. Time now for my daily interview series, Money Talks. Now, we all know those dreaded words, don't we, when you're calling customer service. Please hold, an operator will be with you shortly. We've all been there, stuck on hold for ages, waiting to speak to an advisor about an appointment or a missing parcel. Over the course of the pandemic, this problem only got worse, of course, with so many of us being told by a chatbot, a recorded message driven by artificial intelligence, to call back later after possibly being on hold for an hour or more. But that's not the case with the Lemon Contact Centre, an all-purpose contact centre which provides inbound call services and customer service web chats. It's run by people, not chatbots. Founded in 2003 by Martin Anderson and his wife, Lemon Contact Centre has grown from humble beginnings in the couple's converted garage to become a business employing 100 people with a global clientele turning over millions of pounds. And here's to tell us more about the Lemon story. It's Martin Anderson, CEO and founder of Lemon Contact Centre, my latest guest on Money Talks. Good to have you with us here on The Money. So I've heard of Apple, I've heard of BlackBerry, now I've heard of Lemon. Where'd the name come from?
Exactly that. So when we looked to start the company back in 2003, I come from a telecoms background, and around then you had Orange, you had BlackBerry, you had Apple, and we were literally sat on a Sunday morning, lying in bed, just kind of think, no kids back then, think, what can we call this company? And we were going to call it, I think, Sgt. Pepper's at one point.
Oh, yeah.
Bit of a Beatles spin, bit of a fan in the family, so with Leslie's mum. But then Lemon popped into our mind. I thought, we've got these different fruits which are doing all right for themselves, so there might be room for one more.
It's sharp, it's zingy, and it's good.
Zesty.
In a gin and tonic. So tell us about what happened during the pandemic in terms of people, customer service, call centres and so on. I really do think there was an upsurge in the sort of sense of public dismay and impatience at being endlessly kept on hold.
Yeah, I think like all other industries, it had its pressures, resource people, trying to get people into work, being remotely or whatever it is, or into the office and actually onto the phones or onto live chats was a difficult kind of thing. So everyone had the pressures. Technology is there to assist, and it does, but it was a challenge, it really was, and everyone kind of did the best at that time. But we're coming out of that period now. I think everyone accepts it, and certainly from our business, we're seeing from January, certainly this year, we're not having the impact that COVID had with isolation, etc. And therefore, you start to feel that where people are still using the overhang of COVID, dare I say, as an excuse potentially of not answering the phone.
You can dare to say it because a lot of people think it.
Yeah, it could be a problem, and I know people get irritated when I personally get irritated with when you have recorded messages that are telling you before you even get it's rang once.
Yeah.
It's going to be a long time on hold. We've got no appointments anyway, etc., etc. You're not lining people up for a very good service at that point.
So tell us how your company ensures that we talk to a human rather than a robot. What is it that your company does, and how does it sit between customers and the companies that they're trying to get hold of?
Yeah, so we're an outsourcer, so we work on behalf of other companies. So if you were to ring that company at a certain period of time, you might come through to ourselves. That could be on overflow, or it could be out of hours, or a particular kind of function that we support. Now, the way we look at customer service is very people-to-people based. Right from the start, when Leslie and I started the business, we were answering the phones and doing every job you could possibly do. And we did it on a mobile phone with a fax machine and a pen and paper. So it was very, very human orientated. Obviously, time's gone by and technology's really sort of got into it now. But I'm very focused on technology being blended with people. Technology is fantastic. We know that. Last 2 or 3 decades has exploded, and it can be used really well in a customer service environment. But it should assist the operators who are on the front line, not replace them. And I think that's where the problem's being caused.
But do you actually implement and provide customer service on behalf of the companies, or are you basically there, with all due respect, it's a very successful business and it's great to have you on the show, but are you there basically to tell customers, via a human being rather than a message, that they got to stay on hold for a bit longer or they can't get through?
No, the purpose is with the calls that we can actually hopefully solve their problems.
Oh, I see, OK.
But a lot of it might be that...
So you really have to be plugged into the businesses that you're serving?
Yeah, we have to be able to triage the calls, first line fix if we can, but then when we're calling people out, so we work heavily in the engineering sector and care sectors.
Okay.
So if you've got particularly a retail unit has a plumbing fault or a lift's broken down, it will come through to us. We'll try to do the first.
And where are your people based? You've got more than 100 people now.
Yeah, they're all based in the northeast, in Stockton-on-Tees. Yeah.
Good part of the country.
Yeah, no, yeah.
People like the northeast accent.
Yeah, well, that's it, isn't it? I mean, it's a driver. People.
Rachel Sweeney will love me for that. Our northeast correspondent.
Rachel. No, she's great. Yeah, no, people do, and it's a brilliant driver for us.
So briefly, Martin, what's the vision? How far could this go? You've obviously grown since 2003. Before you had kids, you've got family now.
Yeah.
You're still running the business with your wife. I'd ask you about that, but we haven't got enough time.
Yeah.
What's the vision?
Well, we've done a lot in the last 20 years, but a lot of it's been a bit of a learning curve for Leslie and I since we founded it. But now we've come through the pandemic. I think everyone who has come through stronger, and we want to go further and further with this and be the best that we can in the industry, provide a cracking service to our clients, help everyone around us, create opportunities for our staff and our clients and our suppliers as well, and really hit the ground running and just see how far we can go.
Well, Martin Anderson, you are the co-founder.
I won't get away with that.
Of Lemon Contact Centre. Thanks a lot for being my latest guest on Money Talks, and stay in touch.
Thank you very much.
Lots of you have been emailing in today about our main discussion, should the government be blaming small firms for rising prices? Will said, unless I'm very mistaken, not one person in government has ever run a corner shop. Giving advice and instructions to business owners is rather like a non-parachutist telling an experienced parachutist how to proceed. A good analogy. And Marianne says, it's hard for small businesses to make cuts. Take our milk, which we've had delivered for a couple of years. We absorbed the first rise of 5p per pint because we wanted to support small business. But then when 2 weeks later it went up again, we turned to supermarkets and sadly, small businesses fail. Thanks for emails today. I've really enjoyed the discussion at the top of the show in particular. That's all we've got time for. I'm back tomorrow, same time, same place. But for now, this is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On the Money.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A mixed day again today. Some places staying mostly dry with sunny spells, but in some spots, slow-moving, heavy downpours. Not many isobars on the chart. That's why it's not very windy. That's why the showers and thunderstorms are so slow-moving. And the main focus for them is likely to be across Wales and southwest England, but also into the West Midlands. So in this zone here, torrential rain is possible. Hail and thunder too. There will be showers across northern England, also scattered elsewhere. So some parts of eastern England and northwest Scotland may actually stay completely dry. And in the east of England, with some sunny spells, temperatures just about squeaking over 20 Celsius. But generally, we're looking at high teens. And obviously, temperatures will drop when the downpours come along, and we'll keep those